Well, let's take a look at book 6. I don't know what you're thinking right now. I'm thinking that it's a great book, and that I love it because it's helped to educate me as much as I am educated. But it would be quite natural, perhaps, to be frustrated at this point and wonder, why doesn't he just write a memo or a brief essay outlining what he thinks? Great works of art are their own justification. War and Peace could be 6 pages long if Tolstoy had condensed it, right, made it into short story. But great works of art, they justify themselves by their greatness, and I guess that greatness only exists insofar as we recognize it to be great. And sure, you could reduce the Republic to an outline, and I've given you outlines because I think they're helpful, and I've read the book many times, so I believe that maybe if I have anything to pass on, it's those sort of helps, but there's no substitute for reading the book in terms of, if you're seriously, want to understand Plato's theory of human nature, and more importantly, if you want to seriously evaluate his claim about justice and about crucial about what part of the self is definitive of human nature, rationality or desire, basically, and that is important. I think that what he says in the first book about this being a very serious discussion, because we're deciding here how to live, I think that that's true. On the other hand, I recognize this book goes through many twists and turns, and it's written at a leisurely pace, and it's not written for people who are in a hurry. Perhaps most of the time we are in a hurry, but hey, this is college, right? I mean, it's college over the internet, but it's still college, which means that we have to take our time and meditate on things. And I say that, thinking about book 6, and we're following out a definite argument here, and that is, which is the best way of life, justice or injustice, and which part of the self should I follow, my rationality or my desires? And they get off into what seemingly is a different topic entirely. Once again, talking about who the philosopher is. However, Socrates hasn't forgotten what the main question is. If we look at the beginning of book 6 on page 176, next to margin number 5, Socrates says, "I suppose not. Yet I at least think that the matter would have been made even clearer if we had only that topic to discuss and not the many others that remain for us to explore, if we are to discover the difference between the just life and the unjust one." That is, after all the seeming moving ons that they've done, Socrates continually brings them back to what is really at issue, and that is the difference between the just life and the unjust life, and his challenge, or the challenge that he has to meet to prove the superiority of the just life. But what we get into for most of book 6 is a further description of who the philosopher is. And that philosopher is, in Socrates' mind, many things, but what's essential is that he loves the sight of truth. This is said very well at the bottom of page 176. "Well, do you think there is any difference then between the blind and those who are really deprived of the knowledge of each thing that is, and have no clear model of it in their souls, those who cannot look away like painters to what is most true, and cannot, by making constant reference to it and by studying it exactly as possible, establish here on earth conventional views about beautiful, just, and good things when they need to be established, or guard and preserve those that have been established?" This is drawing on what he said earlier about the difference between the philosopher, who is awake, and the non-philosopher, who's somebody asleep. And the philosopher is awake because he's in touch with what is real, whereas the non-philosopher is only in touch with illusion. So to be a philosopher is to love and to seek that truth. He says on page 177, next to margin letter B in the middle of the page, "Let's agree that philosophic natures always love the sort of learning that makes clear to them some feature of the being that always is, and does not wander between coming to be and decaying. The philosopher is looking for true knowledge, and true knowledge is to be found in that which is, in being, not in that which both is and is not, in the realm of becoming. And it's this disposition towards being that Socrates calls, at the bottom of page 177, a natural affection for the truth. I've said before, it would be a mistake to believe that somehow ancient Greece, even Athens, the city of Athens, where they are, was somehow a really hospitable place for philosophers. Of course, in one sense it was, but it's not as if they were all philosophers. It's not as if the study of philosophy was promoted as something universally good. After all, they did kill Socrates, right? We all know that. Which is to say, once again, in Book 6, Socrates seems to want to rehabilitate the public image of the philosopher, and he admits that most people who call themselves philosophers are phonies. People are posers. Even in his time, there were false philosophers, people who really weren't suited for it, but wanted to appear smart. So once again, he's trying to zero in on what is it that characterizes a true philosopher, and a lot of it is about I think the philosopher has to have a certain character and knowledge, and has to be virtuous, and in all these different ways, and a lot of Book 6 is about how that philosopher is corrupted by social influences and pressures. But we're not really so interested in that. It's really about what is it that the philosopher claims to know. I would ask you to look at page 183 in the middle next to margin letter B. So won't it be reasonable then for us to plead in his defense that a real lover of learning naturally strives for what is? That expression, what is, should have some meaning to you now. He does not linger over each of the many things that are believed to be, but keeps on going without losing or lessening his passion until he grasps what the nature of each thing itself is, with the element in his soul that is fitted to grasp a thing of that sort because of its kinship with it. I want to emphasize that last part, because that gets us closer to the end, frankly. That is, what is part of reality. We as living subjects are in touch with reality. And what truly is, what has being, we are in touch with a particular part of ourselves, of our living, of the living soul of a human being. And it's thought that that part of us has kinship with what is. That's quite important for his argument, because of course, after all, the central argument of the Republic is about the self, and which part of myself should I follow. So that's important. If there's a part of myself that is the part that knows or puts me in touch with what truly is, that is pretty darn important. And as we'll see, the most difficult part of Book 6, the part that emerges at the end of the book, the so-called divided line, and please look at my version of the divided line and amongst the documents in this learning module for that. That's quite important to think of the parts of the self that Socrates has outlined and how they connect with or correlate with the parts of reality, or the levels of reality in that divided line, which we'll look at next.